Live.
Hi everyone! Welcome to another Imagine Science Experimenta. My name is Allison Irvine, and here today, joining us, we have Steve Miller, who's going to be talking to us about his multidisciplinary work and the intersection of art, science, and technology. So we're very excited to have you, Steve.
Thank you for having me here, and this is going to be fun. This is my first, you'd think that this would not be my first, but this is my first online experience like this, such as an interview. Obviously, I've Skyped before and done things like that.
Oh, great. Well, it'll be fun. It'll be an adventure. Sounds good. Okay, so just to start off, so you work in many different mediums. Can you just give like a little bit about your background and kind of like your education and how you kind of got into this current line of work, which obviously we'll show some of your pieces later. They're beautiful.
Thank you. Well, for starters, I have absolutely no science background whatsoever. So I'm not educated in science. Not only am I not educated in science, I did anything to avoid science and math in high school and college.
Yeah.
And it's ironic that I'm obsessed with it now. So no background, but what I understood, as I was becoming an artist and looking at the world, and this was probably in the 80s, and I was in New York City, and I was looking at what I thought the overall cultural paradigm was. And it became clear to me that it was science and technology. And I came through that by a lot of reading, and I was a filmmaker when I first came to New York. I was making my own independent films, and I was working as an assistant AD in commercial films. And I thought that film was the mass audience medium. So it made a lot of sense to think about audience, because Matisse would always say the audience completes the work. So the notion of audience was really in my mind. And I was also doing a lot of reading, one of those people being Michel Foucault. And I've read many of his books. But he wrote one book that was particularly interesting called The Order of Things. And in that book, he goes through the kinds of scientific shifts and cultural shifts and financial shifts that happened over time in culture. And he starts with the Renaissance, and I'm not going to go through the whole book, but he stops with the early part of the 20th century, and he's talking about the rise of industrial capitalism, the move to the cities, and the response of art to these events. And one of those responses was one, we were talking earlier about Antonin Artaud, and the invention of performance art, early in the century, and something that he did called the theater of cruelty. You have someone like Mallarmé using language for its sound rather than for its meaning. And you have someone like Picasso and Braque who are restructuring the visual component of painting in response to the reorganization of culture, and also the fact that painting was marginalized by the rise of photography. So art had to take a new kind of role, or at least the fine arts had to take a new kind of role in response to these cultural shifts. Foucault, not to bore you, called these shifts epistemological breaks. And I'm like that Woody Allen character where he's Midnight in Paris. He wants to live in that time, and then his girlfriend wants to live in the Belle Epoque, which is fine before. But I'm like the Woody Allen character. I want to live in that time, and I'm going like, God, all the opportunities were there. And then I'm thinking, well, what are those new opportunities going to be? What is going to be the change in consciousness, the epistemological break for our time? And it was clear for me that it was going to be artificial intelligence, looking forward into the future. But that path to artificial intelligence is the language of science and technology. And if art is embedded in the language of its particular moment, such as perspective in the early Renaissance, that would be one easy example, where sort of mathematics entered the idea of building a visual pictorial space. It really made sense that that was going to be the area in the language of the time that we're living in now, and that's come to pass. And that paradigm shift constantly changes, which we'll talk about later.
Yeah. Yeah, so you started out in college with just fine art, or
Fine art major. I was a painting, my specialty was painting, and that was a hangover from complete obsession and love of the abstract expressionist painters. I really loved the freedom in that work
yeah.
and the ability to let it rip. And I saw Jackson Pollock at a really early age in a museum where I grew up in Buffalo, New York, and that was it's like one of those life changing. It's like the road to Damascus, St. Paul on the road to Damascus. It's like I had my flash. Oh my God, Jackson Pollock. It's a painting at the Albright Knox Gallery called Convergence, and that kind of set me off on the path towards art.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. Wow. And you work in so many different mediums. So you kind of started with painting, and then over the years you kind of moved on and expanded, or how did that kind of
pretty much, what I haven't done is performance. So you caught me on that one. I know you're a performance artist, but
yeah.
I've done painting, printmaking, drawing, sculpture, video. Kind of an interactive piece online I made in the late 90s called Dreaming Brain. It was something I made with another artist, Colin Voberg, and it was this game about the brain. It was sort of you could go, I think it's still online somewhere if someone's ambitious enough, but it was so early on. I think we've maintained all the different video. It had 360 panos. You could enter the pano and go to a different world and things like that. So I played with that interactive notion of the internet. I'm making sculptures now, and I'm also doing something that has to do with, I'm doing the pure data play now. We'll talk about that later.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, one of your kind of works that struck me was your project Health of the Planet. I would love to show some of the sculptures from that, if you want to kind of talk about that process. I was really interested to kind of see because I know that you collaborated with scientists and botanists and zoologists and different things like that with this art. What was that collaboration like?
Well, that project started out with being invited to a show in Brazil, to show my work in a group show in Brazil. And I fell in love with Brazil. I realized I had to spend time there. And so the idea was, you can hang on that for a second, and then, the idea is that if the Amazon are the lungs of the planet, I could give Brazil a medical checkup by taking X-ray of the lungs and metaphorically X-ray the lungs of the world. So what you're looking at right here is a digital file of an X-ray of an Amazon orchid that happens to be in an office in Times Square. But the idea was to X-ray the flora and the fauna and show the complexity and the beauty of the natural environment. And sculpture was one aspect of how I showed that. This started out as a series of digital prints, which you could click on if you went to prints. Go over to, go to prints.
Prints, okay.
There you go. And then go to, you're on books now, so actually click on prints. Okay, so click that, and you'll see, you can see Health of the Planet. And then eventually Fashion Animal. Maybe click Health of the Planet.
Okay.
You can get to that link. But the idea is that I started out going to talk about the collaboration and answer your question. I was looking for a way to X-ray, obviously, Amazon plants. That's what I started out with. That's a lot easier than doing the animals. And it took 3 years to find a radiologist in Sao Paulo, and that was the place to do it because they have a huge market there. And what you want to do is get the plants to the market. I took a biologist to the market, and we chose Amazon plants. And any of these works. You're looking at paintings. Now, the prints was it. Can you get on the print thing?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, click that for a second. And then go to Health of the Planet. Click on that link.
Sure.
It's center image on the top. So we started out, you could just click through this. We started out just taking these plants. I had a week in a hospital in Sao Paulo at night, and we just took that's a cacao plant up top, and we spent a week and we X-rayed as many plants as we could, and that ended up as a digital series of prints. You can click through quickly if you want to.
Okay.
If you've got control of the screen. So these are orchids and pods that grow in the Amazon, and there's just a series. This is Bird of Paradise. So that was the start of it. And
Okay.
eventually, I started to make these works on paper. That is okay. Hang on that image for a second. That is a jackfruit, and this is really where the title of the project comes from, because rarely do you have two of these fruits on one stem. And when we X-rayed it, that's a straight X-ray, not cut open. That's looking through the jacka, and it looks like a series of human lungs. So it worked very well to use that image as sort of the lungs of the planet. And that morphed into these different areas. But working with the scientists, so how did I find a guy in Brazil? One of my collectors runs a hedge fund. The fund was invested in a barium company. I've used barium in my work to enhance the X-rays. They were selling their barium to a hospital in Brazil. They connected me to the head of radiology at the hospital, and they agreed to do the collaboration. And it got a lot more complicated. Now go to prints again.
Okay.
And go to fashion animal. And click on upper left, fashion animal. So then the next part was to figure out how to do the animals. And where are the animals? And the animals are in the Amazon. The Brazilian zoos are often not very well maintained and underfunded. But I found a hospital in the Amazon, and I came up with this idea for this show that was in Rio that took place in 2011 to combine the X-rays of, there's a live bird, by the way, from the aviary.
Oh, wow.
So I'm working with a vet, okay? I'm working with animal handlers. I didn't handle this live bird. The woman that was the vet at the aviary brought this bird in. They wanted to X-ray the bones to see why they're having so many broken bones, and they're wondering whether it was related to the diet. So they brought this bird in for me to X-ray. We actually taped the bird down to the X-ray plate. But the idea behind this fashion animal was that there's always this dialogue between consumption and natural resources. And this, you can just keep clicking if you want to just flip through while I'm talking. The idea is that we all want these luxury objects. Well, some people do at any rate. And and there's this competition between the need for the resources and the resources. And the idea behind this show was to bring these animals and show the beauty of them and compare them to some of the ways they're used. Like literally, these animals become handbags at some time. And to get this radiologist in Belém, B-E-L-E-M, which is at the mouth of the Amazon, took 3 years. He's an amazing guy called Octavio Lobo, and he made his clinic, that's a school of piranhas. He made his clinic available for me for 10 nights. So we go in every night at 6, maybe stop at 11, and so one night we get an alligator. This is a ray, a freshwater river ray, and we would get these different animals brought in every night. Turtles, I think, are coming up. So there was a review of this show. So this is a sloth. This is a a baby sloth and the adult sloth. And this piece is called Sloth Pieta because the sloth is kind of the canary in the coal mine for Brazil. They're cutting down the habitat that they live in, which is the trees. They get isolated in these small pods of trees. They can't travel. They're burning the trees, and they're very susceptible to pollution. So I call this Sloth Pieta. But the idea is to really highlight this kind of contentious and difficult argument to resolve, which is we need these resources. The resources are much more beautifully designed than anything that we can make, than a handbag or a shoe. And I wanted to sort of bring this dialogue to the forefront in Brazil and obviously all over the world. And the other thing, so then I did that. I got involved with a fashion company, and we put all the designs on clothing. for a really good company in Brazil called Osklen. And they have a store in Soho, and actually the clothes are there now. But for me, the idea was, and I worked with this company because they have great sustainable practices, and also the idea that you could use fashion as a medium to get this word out. So fashion, sculpture, surfboards. The idea is to get the dialogue in a worldwide conversation in as many places as possible.
Right, which I think also is kind of the beauty of, combining art, science, technology is you kind of reach a wider target audience almost, and so that's awesome that you're, spreading this message, trying to put it in like as many different mediums as you can to just try and get the message across.
And a lot of times, like now I'm working at the Large Hadron Collider, which is at CERN, right? That's in Geneva. That's where they're looking for the Higgs boson. And so I've been there for a couple of years. I'm starting to make that work now. There's usually a 2 or 3 year time delay between going there. I first went there 2 years ago in January before they officially found the Higgs. They announced it in the following July. And the machine was down, and I got in there because I'd been working with some scientists at Brookhaven earlier. And at Brookhaven at that time, that machine was looking at something called quark gluon plasma, which is the plasma state of matter after Big Bang, when quarks, gluons, and Higgs bosons are floating in this plasma state before they start attracting each other and forming, the elementary particles of electrons, protons. So I had some experience, and through those scientists, I got access at CERN, and I went to CERN and interviewed the scientists, took thousands of photographs, went back many times, and that was so. With the health of the planet, we're looking at a sort of environmental discussion that needs to take place, and it can take place in the realm of art, and a lot of people are doing it as well as myself. And it can take place, and I wanted to expand it to a larger audience. So the fashion and surfing was a logical way to do that. Also, the animals on the surfboards look like trophies, right? Like the dead alligator.
Oh yeah, let me show those. They're great.
Yeah, people hunt, an animal, and the idea was, you take that alligator, stuff it, and hang it on the wall. So I did that with a lot of different animals that we x-rayed. Okay, so this is one piece. This is 3 boards that constitute a school of piranhas. And there's something interesting about the water and surfing as also an image of Brazil, and it's a worldwide fascination right now, so it's a wonderful vehicle to use as a way to communicate these ideas about the environment. So there you have the alligator, right?
Yeah.
And, that's the typical alligator you would stuff. In this case, it's an x-ray of an alligator. And the idea is to, the reason why I'm using x-rays is to look inside the world and also to see its complexity and its beauty.
Yeah.
So it's CERN, there's another issue which is about the origin of the universe, which really grabbed my imagination. And between, right before the health of the planet, I'd worked with this guy called Rod McKinn at Rockefeller, and he won the 2003 Nobel in chemistry for figuring out how positively charged ions move across cell membranes. So I'm looking at biological health, I'm looking at planetary health, and then I'm looking at primal evolutionary history, which is kind of what they're doing at CERN. So science is just this incredible. There's 2 things why I'm really into it. One, the visual language of it is really exciting, and the second part of it is that the content is automatic, right? This is an important concept right now. It's the health of the body with the work I did with Rod, how the body communicates with each other through something called the potassium channel. We communicate through these charged particles that move across our cell membranes at 100,000 to 1,000,000 per second. So that's a phenomenon. And it has a lot to do with health, and I'd been involved in doing the imagery of the genome previously, so it was a natural segue to work with Rod. Then you have this health of the planet thing. Then I'm working, at CERN right now and making that work. And that's That's really interesting because that's about the history of consciousness.
Oh,
Because
wow.
we can go look back in time, right? And we now know we're looking at these. It's controversial now, but we're looking at these possible gravitational waves
Mhm.
that give us verification that the universe is expanding. I don't know if you, some people know about this dialogue.
I have heard about this, yeah.
So it's an antenna at the South Pole, and in conjunction with the Hubble, they're trying to put together data that verifies Big Bang and the expansion of the universe, and what's driving that expansion, which theoretically is dark matter, dark energy.
Hmm.
So, we come from stardust, these elementary particles, and for some reason we've gone from inorganic to organic, and then we have consciousness, and so now we're able to use our consciousness and go back and look at the origin of the universe. So
Hmm.
that's a really
Wow.
interesting subject. So science has this amazing potential to be incredibly beautiful to look at. So it's got a great language, and then it's
Mhm.
just loaded with our history and the most important things about being human.
Yeah, I definitely think so too. Lots of like images of cells and everything. They're art to me as well. So with this current project, like what form is this art taking on? I mean, to explore consciousness is a huge undertaking.
Right.
So
Well,
are you?
that's I'm just plain. So now, so what? So I'm always making a body of work, and then ask me what
Yeah.
I'm doing now because I'm doing something else, which is the next paradigm, which we could talk about.
Yeah.
But it's CERN. The problem is, this is the problem with arts, with science dialogue. If I start talking about science to anybody,
Hmm.
I can put them to sleep in about 3 seconds. They start to nod off. They start to say words that they don't know. Potassium channel, positively charged ion. I mean, this is all the stuff that I and everybody else I know avoided in high school,
Hmm.
right? You would do anything not to take a science course or a
Yeah.
math course. So, the problem with the normal audience is trying to not to make as an artist, don't make the mistake to explain science because every time I try to tell people, for instance, about Rod's achievements, Rod McKinnon,
Mhm.
who got the Nobel, it's it's relatively understandable because it's in the realm of images and dots that you can follow, and there's a logical progression to how cells communicate.
Mhm.
Even with that knowledge, when you start to talk to the non-science audience, the art audience, they're dead, they're asleep. They see a
Mhm.
diagram, they don't want to interpret it. So it's a really interesting subject to be in because you have to figure out how to tell the story without telling the story. So to get back to your question at CERN, so I'm spending a lot of time there. I gave a lecture at CERN. I have lunches and dinners with the scientists. So I'm sitting in the room with John Ellis and Luis Alvarez Gomez, and we're sitting around having these conversations. And I'm not
Mhm.
a physicist, so
Yeah.
I'm in sort of this interesting position. Like every other grad student in the world would love to be at this lunch that I'm at with these five
Definitely.
guys, and it's daunting. And your brain is like, why am I doing it? Because it's like fireworks in your head. The whole
Mhm.
time you're there. It's like incredibly exciting and stimulating. And you're asking them questions about what they're doing. Why do they indulge me? Because they need to get their message out. It's very hard for them to get the message out because if Higgs boson, what's that? Well, that's the mechanics by which other particles gain mass,
Mhm.
and
Right.
people are done with it. So
It's true.
what I think I need to do is an artist is to convey the complexity and the beauty of the experience and let you feel the idea that this is really a vast body of knowledge, that it's cosmic in nature. It
Mhm.
has to do with contextualizing us who we are, and it's not very easy to understand. And it maybe gives you a reference point
Right.
in terms of where you are in relationships to the universe. And
Mhm.
doing that, if I could do that in a work of art, that's amazing. So that's kind of what's going on with CERN.
Yeah, you
But
definitely bring
there's
up a good point with science communication because I feel like well, science communication is its own kind of field of study. Like it's very difficult to communicate these complex issues without the background. So I think that's great that you're, putting in the time with these scientists and not just doing like a, 1-day workshop to try and understand, but like a full, dinners and like over time, discussing and trying to figure out a way to communicate that, which is great.
It's a lot, as an artist, it's a lot of studying to read material. You go to a lunch like that. I did a lot of preparation. I did a lot of reading, and then I can do a pretty good job of explaining a lot of basic level of particle physics to the layperson. But that's not the role of art, is not to explain, but to communicate another level of communication that makes the viewer understand where they are and what time they're in. And I think that's more like the direction that I'm going. So I'm physically making this body about CERN, and now you ready for the, I don't know where we are in this list of questions, but there's something very different going on right now. And so, like I said, I always have this time lag. So a few years ago, so like when I was doing DNA, I realized it was about proteins. It's not about DNA, it's about RNA. And proteins tell the other cells in the body what to do. So it's not about, having the genome, all the knowledge about the genome and patenting genes. It's really about what the proteins do, because the proteins go to specific cells. And that's the thing that was important. So I go there, I look at where the real, and the proteins are the money shot, because that's where all the drug companies are looking. So I'm going like, okay, the money's there, let's look where the money is. And then with the environment, obviously that's a worldwide conversation. With CERN, now we're getting to the sort of a completion of this concept of the standard model, where Peter Higgs proposed that there must be a particle that unifies Maxwell's theory of magnetism, electromagnetism, with the theory of the beta degrading particle, which is radiation. And so they needed this other particle, which in part explained and unified the theory to get a unified theory of the universe, which is the standard model for quantum mechanics. And that's interesting. I'm still investigating it now. And that was obviously the next big experiment in science. But then there's this other cultural shift that's happening right now. And I knew that a few years ago, and it's called big data. So a lot of people are involved with big data. And obviously Google, Yahoo, that's what it's all about, big data. And I realized that this is an area that I had to, just like pop culture and advertising and media culture that Warhol understood was the kind of cultural icon of the maybe post-World War period, late 50s, 60s, pop culture. We now have big data culture. So we went from like the internet, then we, now we're at this, right? Mobile app, right? This is it. So I understood that there was no accurate or interesting accumulation of data in relationship to culture. And what I was interested in doing was figuring out if there was a way to look at data culture and analyze it, which I'm doing now, and trying to figure out what I can learn with that knowledge. Like, I don't know what I'm going to learn at CERN, about the cosmos, and I'm not sure what I'm going to learn specifically about the art culture through big data. So me and a partner invented a Trojan horse, and it's called Art Local, and it's for the iPhone. And what it is it's a gallery locator to find galleries in New York City, and we're a Canadian company, so we're in Toronto too, and it's going to hopefully expand and do the whole damn world, right? That's our goal. And we just got accepted into the New Museum Inc., the New Inc., which is the incubator at the New Museum. I don't know if you know about that, but it is the place to be for anybody creative interested in big data. So it's very competitive. I'm really proud that we're in it. It's an incredible achievement. And we're going to be in an incubator with hopefully some of the brightest and creative minds to look at our data collecting machine, which is a free service to anybody else that wants to look at galleries, and also start to look at, like, how do people look at art? How do they search for art? What are they thinking about? What are they looking at? How many times do they go back to the same image? Which images are the most popular? So
Right.
we're going to be like the Moneyball of the art world. We're going to be, I don't know if you know that movie, right? The guy, he's he's analyzing, they have no budget, and they're trying to figure out how to make a baseball team work.
Right.
And he starts looking at how to get base hits, right? So you got to get on base before you get to home. I don't know if you know that movie.
Yeah.
But it's basically, there's no rational data analytics in the art world right now. Most of the analytics are what people in the field call bad data. That would be auction records where they're manipulated, there's guarantees. It's not really a fair market, and most of the art sales in the world, is a manipulated, controlled market as well. So, but how people look at art, you can't control, and you can't, it would be hard to manipulate. So what I'm doing is providing the template for people like you and anybody else. It's a premier art tool. You're going to flip out if you use it. It's amazing. And you're going to be able to, it's up, it's in the App Store. You can download it.
Oh, great. Okay. That was my next question.
Yeah, this is not theoretical. This is happening. But, what I'm working on currently, as I realize that the new cultural paradigm shift is big data. And, these things move really quickly. And I knew that I had to be a part of it. And the way to be a part of it was to create a data collector. And the data collector is people using the app to look for art.
Wow, yeah, that's amazing. That's very important research, and that's a great way to kind of get that big data, is like make an app, because so many people use apps these days, and there's just so many more.
Well, this one is really, really brilliant. You're not going to get much modesty out of me on this. I'm really proud of it. And it's so far superior to anything else that's out there.
Yeah.
And there's 3 of us, and we're really motivated to make it the best tool it can possibly be. But in terms of, this is art science. This is taking technology and science to reach, so I did the fashion stuff to reach, to have that billboard, clothing as a billboard, and the surfboards as a billboard. Now, we know that the whole world is going to be mobile. You're going to get all your information there. You're not going to go to websites and go to individual galleries on the internet. I mean, it's just too cumbersome. And what we learned in our, all this research on looking at data and the accumulation and collection of data, it's click and reward. So that's the data collector, click and reward. So you have to reward every click. So I'm learning how to reward click, to have an exchange with the audience. Obviously, it's like you're not going to use Google. We know that when we search on Google, they're looking at our searches and then selling our algorithm. So I look at, art galleries and art information online, and so if I am at another website, it's very likely that an art ad will come up, like a banner for Larry Gagosian or something would come on the screen, right? So, this is where we are right now. That's why, the Edward Snowden thing is so controversial, because he brought to the foreground the fact that this has been going on for a long time. And it's being used for lots of different purposes. I think that what we're doing is going to create a dialogue between the user and the art, because there's an aspect of the app that connects you with the gallery, and when you walk in the gallery, they'll know what your preferences are, they'll give you a press release. So it allows for this kind of interactive exchange between the gallery and the user, and I think that's going to bring more interest in brick and mortar. But I love this idea of understanding that one of the ways to look at culture is through data. One way to look at the world is through the origin of the universe. One way to look at the health of the body is the way cells communicate. One way to understand the health of the planet is to look at how we're destroying the environment. So, I suppose maybe I'm in all these different kind of worlds at once, but it's this, undying need to have as much information at my fingertips as possible. Yeah. So that's what I'm up to right now. I realize that, and if big data turns into artificial intelligence, then I'm going to have to be over there. I don't know, but right now I know that big data And this idea that the universe is expanding is something really fascinating. And what's going on in CERN is that particle physics, quantum mechanics, and cosmology are becoming one and the same. You know, these sort of separate fields are now becoming unified again. Cosmology was like alchemy, you know, centuries ago. Now cosmology is taking the practical aspects of quantum mechanics and expanding it to a cosmic level. So, you know, we're in an incredible time right now. And I think science, technology, and art combine the way to understand the time that we live in the best possible way.
Definitely, I couldn't have said it better. Your projects sound amazing. I'll definitely put the link to that app in this events page, and as well maybe post it on our Google Plus page. I'm really excited about it. Thank you so much, Steve. We're actually running out of time. I would love to talk to you some more, but thank you so much for joining us. Do you have any? Yeah. Do you have any final thoughts or anything that you want to share before we go?
You know, nothing other than that it's an incredibly complex moment that we live in right now.
Yeah.
And it's not possible, it's no longer possible to have one focus. You have, you know, you need all of this different skill set to understand the world. And I think that's the message that I would leave to anybody is that you really need, you know, I teach, I investigate, I consult, I do all these different things, I lecture, and that you need this skill set. To be an artist today, I think you need a very diverse set of skills in order to survive. And because the world is changing so quickly, you have to be able to adapt to it. And you know, for me as an artist, I'm constantly looking at how it's changing and investigating those changes.
Yeah, definitely. So fascinating. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here. And thank you to everyone for watching. I just want to remind everyone to please go check out Imagine Science Film's CROWDRISE page. It's linked on this events page to keep these experiments going. It would be great. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Steve.
And sweet dreams to the audience if we put you to sleep.
Not at all. I'm sure not at all. Okay. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye.